Hello and welcome to a new interview. My partner today, my guest is Alice Miller, and I'm so fascinated with what she's doing because she has had for a long time a wide background in information technology, transpersonal psychology, and meditation. And then she found some innovative neurofeedback training programs. She was so fascinated with what they could do that she decided to blend them. And that happened already in 2011. And since then, Alice has accompanied more than 1,000 clients and seen the magnificent changes taking place in the brain, in the behavior, in your moods by just applying modern science with or merging modern science with ancient wisdom. Welcome, Alice. So happy you are here.
Thank you so much for having me, Astrid. And I'll apologize in advance to your guests. I do not speak German.
Well, using
Lisa, guten
using
Tag.
Guten Tag is wonderful. I'll use the new technology to have it translated, which usually I did it years ago, and it took me about 3 days to get one translation done. And nowadays, with the AI, I hope that it's going to be much, much faster. So we can
Hmm.
in both languages, English and German.
Hmm.
So, do you have kind of a little presentation that you could show us what you're doing with your brainwave technology, merging it with ancient wisdom like meditation, or changing your
I can explain it. I don't have a presentation on this particular computer,
wonderful? So just talk about
but
it.
I can certainly explain it as best I can. The one caveat I would have is no matter how many times you explain it, or if somebody does a training and they're very excited, they share it with somebody else, the person never actually gets a good idea of what it is. Uh, and then they come and they do and go, oh, that's not what I imagined. And of course, by the end of the week, they love it. So here goes the best I can. So what we do is we take technology to give you feedback on your own brain. And then you using the feedback, change your brain. And so it's the fastest, quickest way I know how to make progress. So the analogy is so you have advanced and masters. They did a study in Japan years ago where they studied the brain waves of the whole group in this particular monastery. And they were able to determine what the brainwave pattern of the beginner, the intermediate, and the advanced Zen master look like.
Mm,
So when you're doing this training, it's a very intense 5-day training. You're changing your brain as much as somebody who spent decades meditating. In essence, you change your brain. Instead of taking decades, you do it in 5 days.
yeah, and it's a program that basically every day for 5 days, you're what happens in those 5 days?
So you're getting neurofeedback, an intense training for the brain. So you're training your brain how to get in those states. So if anybody's done ayahuasca, they've done mushrooms, etc., the drug's putting you in those expanded states. Where this, you're putting yourself in those states using feedback. So if you think in terms of your life, you receive feedback all the time. It could be negative feedback, it could be positive feedback. It's always feedback as you move into the world, your own inner world, the external world. This, because of the technology, it's speeding things up. So that's how you can make such fast progress.
If I get you correctly, it's electrodes put to my head where you, with your technology, measure my brain waves
And
and
then give you audio or both audio and visual feedback. So I'll tell you what we do. I break it down for a moment. The first part we do is we do focus on optimizing the brain. It's like the hierarchy of needs. First you have to eat, you have to sleep, da da da. And in this case, you want your brain to be operating as efficiently as you can.
hmm
So if people have, so we do a brain map. We do a 19-channel EEG, and then we analyze the brain. And we're able to pick up things such as, oh, this person looks like they're probably a poor speller. This person looks like they have PTSD. This person is very good spatially. They're very good creatively, might have problems with short-term memory. So all kinds of aspects of that person. It's almost like a psychic reading sometimes, because you get so much information from looking at their EEG. Then, with that information, there's a component of the program where we target those issues. So if you have short-term memory issues, or you wanted to improve your ability to pay attention, so if you had attention deficits. So that's an aspect, it sounds more clinical, and it's a minor not minor, but it's a component of the program. We are not clinical, but we can address those things while people are here. But the other part, the other part of it is the consciousness piece. So we're using neurofeedback so that you can put yourself into an expanded state of awareness. And we have some techniques, protocols, tools to help you get out of your own way so you can get there faster. And the side effect of that is you have more peace, you have more quieter mind, your creativity goes up, all kinds of wonderful things take place. At the end of the week, you're able to shift more efficiently, more effectively into whatever state you need. There's a underlying principle that for every experience you have as a living human being, you have an underlying pattern of brainwaves. So if you're meditating, your brainwaves locally have an expanded state, increase the amplitudes of alpha. Potentially, the longer you meditate, the more adept you are. You see the emergence of frontal theta. If you are focusing, you're doing some kind of report, you're going to be more in a beta standpoint or brainwave. So every experience you have is a different pattern brainwave. So at the end of the week, you're able to more effectively shift into the pattern that you need to more effectively do things.
So
or be.
basically, I can decide, and now I've been driving a car. I've been probably in beta because I have my attention everywhere and nowhere. And
Correct.
then when I get out, I decide shut off beta. Now I want to go down to alpha, where my mind is working more on an intuitive basis. Is that what happens?
Yeah, and the two can be true. So you can elevate your alphas and you're still beta. You're still engaged in the external world. So you're using all the time, you're employing different networks in different frequencies, and they're all woven together. So in this training, you are teaching your brain, using the feedback, how to navigate that more effectively and efficiently. So at the end of the week, a lot of people experience that they're able to do more with less. So somebody who's always tired at the end of the day, finding like they're not so tired anymore. When my dad, he was 80 when he came to do it, he used to have a nap every afternoon. He did the training, no longer needed the nap.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when I understand you correctly, the first 3 days, I get firstly, I get an image of the situation I'm in right now, and with your technology, you can take out spikes that are unnatural. Is that something? I imagine that it's something like a waveform, more or less pronounced, and some waves might be just not harmful, but molesting. What happens if
Not
I'm
serving.
very
Yeah.
furious, for instance? There must be some spikes in my brainwaves because I'm just furious. And is that something underlying, if I'm furious all the time, that you can just smooth out within the first 3 days by applying the technology you have?
Okay, this is really good. So it's not spike so much as the different networks being employed in different ways. So the first day we do the brain map. So we get to know who you are from that point of view.
Okay.
And then the consciousness piece is all throughout the week. The CAV training is every day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, where you're addressing issues related to what we've seen that might not serve you, or maybe enhancing something that you have that's great. The opportunity in the so what happens when we're angry all the time, when we have a loss of emotional regulation? So that would show up in your brain. On day one, we would see that, oh, it looks like you might have trouble with your emotional regulation, whatever it is. Most times when we're angry, we're not necessarily angry about what happened today. It's what happened in the accumulation of our lives, mostly when we were young. And what we do in the consciousness element of it, we get into the space and you end up changing your brainwaves where you're holding all these old stories so that you're learning how to drop the story and clearing up those narrow pathways. And then there's other opportunities to generate new ones so that people, after the training, they find that they're not reacting so much. You know, something externally happens, is like, they end up being able to choose if they want to respond or not respond. It is a funny thing that happens. So somebody say, for example, they have meltdowns 3 times a week at the checkout. And they do the training, they leave, and 3 months later they look back and they go, oh, I used to have a meltdown 3 times a week. I've had 3 times in the last 3 months because that trigger is no longer there. What I find interesting, if you're looking at changing a behavior, so you do some kind of cognitive therapy, some kind of cognitive behavior investment, you try really hard. I'm not going to yell at the checkout clerk, and then you go and it's like, almost. Oh, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. Oh, I lost it. So you're really having to effort to make that change. This, you come in, you clear out those narrow pathways, you go into, you become have a new normal, and you go into your life, and all of a sudden it's like those triggers aren't even there, so you didn't even notice them.
Great. So if I understand it correctly, many of our problems are coming from old traumas, something we have experienced in our childhood or
Yeah.
whenever before that even. And when I understand you correctly, that's something you can detect in the brain because it's not the smooth, normal functioning you would expect to see. Then, and you can change that a little bit, and at the same time, with the feedback, it makes me aware of what you're doing.
Yeah. So you're changing using the feedback, you're changing your brainwaves. So the protocol most often used for a big part of it is forgiveness. And
That's a
typically
huge
we would,
one.
yeah,
Forgiveness
typically we
is
would tell people that that's what we do because they wouldn't come. But at the end of the week, everybody's really happy that they did it because they can make the fastest, quickest change to the brain using this particular protocol. And the reason for it is to clear out the clutter that gets in your own way, your belief systems, issues. So if you know, were 5 years old and you wanted sprinkles on your ice cream, you didn't get it, you had a meltdown, that's a 5-year-old trauma. It's still a trauma. It's a 5-year-old trauma. Um, and whatever patterns we then create, whatever story we tell ourselves, and that gets enhanced, reaffirmed, and reaffirmed. And so the opportunity is to actually drop the story and uh, create a new one, or don't create anything at all. Sit in the sense of being versus the you know the human thinking mind.
well, I'm always
It's
one
quite profound.
to try and translate that into practicality. So if I
Yeah.
imagine that my mother, whom I love dearly, decided
Yes.
I wouldn't have the sprinkles on my ice cream today, and it make me melt down and really make me angry, could that translate into my beloved partner, uh, 30 years later, who has just earned a salary raise and ideally wish for a new coat or whatever it is, or diamond on my finger, and he decides to say no, does that give me the same meltdown? Probably.
Potentially, yeah. It might be
Potentially.
expressed a different way, but it's a trigger for that. And
Mm,
we're using a really simplistic example. But these things affect our lives, and we can't reduce it. We can't reduce it to that one thing. People try to all the time, but that's not necessarily what we have. Is we have this wonderful hack that allows us to address people's issues that they might not be consciously aware of.
yeah, yeah. I
So we
get it.
work with them.
It's just to clarify what brainwave entrainment can do, and that's just one very very small example. I mean, it's
Yeah,
much wider, much broader. There's so many habits we have. Brings me to the question: any addiction would probably show in the brain,
yeah,
and
yeah.
how do you?
And I'm going to jump in with a little correction there. It's not entrainment.
Okay,
Entrainment's like if you have a drum, for example, people end up in training to
yeah,
that
yeah,
vibration.
yeah.
This is you're getting feedback on your brain,
Okay.
and then you're making the change. So it's like a navigation system. It's a GPS.
Which is respecting my freedom. I don't want somebody to train my brain in a way that I have no say in what is happening. And that's where
Correct.
that comes in. Great.
Correct.
Great for
Yeah.
that distinction. Thank you.
Yeah.
So there is lots of daily problems, I imagine, that can be addressed with this type of brain wave. What do you call it? If not entrainment, it's
Training.
training, brainwave
Yeah.
training. So,
Yeah.
do you have any small stories of what happened to people who went through your program? I mean, you had thousands going through, so there must be some outstanding small stories of what happens
Yeah.
when I do the training for 5 days, a whole week.
Yeah. So and this I've been doing this since 24, no, 2011. So and I didn't start with my own company. Then my new company has come recently. However, I can tell you some stories about what happened with people. Um, so this is kind of an interesting thing that happens in the training. It's repeatable. So when something's repeatable, you pay attention. One of the things, and it's fresh in my mind because it happened a couple weeks ago with a client. She hadn't talked to her sister in a few years, and she forgave her sister, again, changing where she held things at the level of the brainwave. And that night, her sister called her. And she's like, oh my goodness, she hasn't phoned me forever, like years. And that's something that happens quite a bit. So there's something that happens, how connected we really are with everybody.
I tried it with
In terms of,
Ho'oponopono, which
yeah,
actually has the same effect, and because that's quantum physics, we are all connected. And if I decide to forgive the other person, no matter what they are, they feel it in a way.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's just a wonderful shortcut. What else?
So a lot of people, one of my sisters did this as adults, went off to higher education,
Oh,
something they've always wanted to do but had never done. And all of a sudden, it's like their capacities, I want to do more. People's income goes up, people's um, start businesses, expand businesses, get promotions, unemployed people, they end up getting jobs if they want them. So the outcome happens in your life as well as your inner life. The outcomes happen in your capacity. You can handle more. And it's not like you think, okay, I got all this brain power. All of a sudden you find your life easier, and yeah, you end up reaching to more or expanding your world. Um,
I imagine it's got to do with our emotions because none of us has is in an even pattern all day, all week long. There are small little
Correct.
things which get us out of our way, take us to a different brain thought. And if you can control that because you've through the feedback you have learned to realize, or even it doesn't trigger you anymore
Yeah.
because you've actually had the feedback on it, then I can perfectly well imagine that it makes me much more efficient, focused, probably. How would you express it?
Well, I would say that a lot of your limiting belief systems dissolve. I remember one woman, she did the training and she an issue came up where she was 6 or 7 and these white kids, she wasn't white, and these white kids came and they tormented her and beat her up and stuff like that. After doing the training, she phoned me up one day and she said, Alice, white people are being so nice to me. They hadn't changed, right? But that story had dissolved. So now she's meeting people and taking them for who they are. Um,
Well, if I have a grudge, I broadcast it to all my acquaintances without even noticing that that's what I'm doing. And the
mhm,
reaction of the other side usually is not very pleasant. So when
right,
I have solved that problem within myself, I have a big
right,
smile on my face. Uh,
yeah,
that helps a lot with the environment having a smile too.
yeah, yeah. One of the things, the biggest thing that well, there's so much that I took away personally, but one of the things that I've gotten from doing it is having a quiet mind. And
Mm.
for that, there's nothing I would change. There's no amount of things I wouldn't do to have this because it's night and day living. You know, instead of monkey mind, it's quiet, and that is a really big takeaway for me, having done the training.
Monkey mind, I'm trying to think like the Germans do. We're not so acquainted with these expressions. So, so if you're getting distracted, or if you're sitting still and your thoughts start wandering in one direction, another direction, another direction, and they get lost at the end of 10 minutes, you don't even know what you thought about, but the time is gone. Is that
Yeah,
what you're, and then the quiet
yeah.
mind, what would that do?
Well, you don't have that chattering monkey mind. Um, oh, why is she wearing that? Did I put the kettle on? Yeah. Oh, buh, 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 buh.
So I decide to do something and I can just stay on track of doing what I want to do, and I'm not being distracted by whatever happens on the outside or
Yeah,
somebody, whatever.
yeah,
And that's it's one of the biggest takeaways I expect, but hard to understand for somebody who has never been in the quiet mind.
yeah. And to be fair, to be fair, um, I've done quite a few trainings, but people will report that their mind is quieter. Um, People report all kinds of things, such as more creative. Um, they have easier decision time. They can make decisions easier. They laugh more. They're clear-minded, and yeah. So it's a ripple effect. It's getting right within, and of course, it ripples into your life afterwards. The number one improvement, the absolute number one improvement for people report is relationships,
Um,
because you're improving your relationship to yourself. And once that happens, it ripples into your relationships that you have with everybody else.
that's one of the most exciting results because years ago I came across this little exercise to stand naked in front of a mirror and say I love myself, and that's one of the hardest things to do when you haven't started working on yourself. you look at yourself and you say, oh my gosh, how can I love this person in the mirror? That flabby belly or whatever it is that you decide is making you
Yeah.
ugly. And once you get there, it's a long way of hard work to really be able to love yourself. But once you do love yourself, it's not egotistical. And that's something you could basically achieve in 5 days. Am I correct?
Yeah. 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 Um, it's something we all have to do, yet it's one of the hardest things that we do as human beings. It should be so natural, but it has not been. However, when you're able to find love for yourself through and change your brain, the way of how you feel, in essence, what happens at one point in the training, all of a sudden you pop and you realize that you have an ego, but that's not who you are.
Hmm.
And then you're aligned with you have this other sense of you have your sense of being, and from there the relationship changes. And there's some people who come in and they've had no idea they have an ego or what the ego is, and they're very caught up in their minds, their little minds, and then they have access through their big mind, and little mind can never go where big mind is. It just can't.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the shortest, quickest way I've ever seen to get people to drop their little mind and have the experience of big mind. That changes everything.
Can you give an example? Like, what's the little mind? That's maybe somebody who's constantly unhappy or feels that the world is against me and everything is
Mhm.
trying to
So
get,
our little mind is our thinking mind.
yeah.
I talked about monkey mind or thinking mind, and somebody says something to you and it offends you, or somebody um, you're worried, you have anxiety, uh, you're going about your life and very much aware of what the external world is bringing to you, and then reacting to it.
Yeah, but it's
Um,
isn't it based in my subconscious? Because in my very subconscious, I have decided that I'm a poor being and everybody is against me. And whatever
Both,
I do
yes.
daily is
Oh, 100%.
tainted by that subconscious belief that somehow during my childhood, my parents always said, it's good enough, you'll never get it, you don't even try because you're too stupid. All these things they have been collected in my subconscious, and then nowadays I'm an adult and I start wondering why doesn't nothing anything work?
Yeah. Yep. Oh, 100%. 100%.
So the little
So,
mind springs from the subconscious, and what you actually do is,
and your mind itself. Um,
okay,
okay, little mind's thinking. It's trying to reason and deduce and logic and you name it,
okay,
reacting all over the place. Fear. Big mind, when you drop little mind, big mind, we tend to think of it in terms of a spiritual experience.
yeah,
You're outside of your skin encapsulated ego. And when you have that, I had somebody recently, and what happened in their experience is they dissolved. So they were in nothingness with everything. So people maybe have an out of body experience. They might have this experience that um, is ineffable. It's hard to describe. The feeling of oneness, the feeling of merging, and that changes how they then view themselves in relation to themselves and then everybody around them.
yeah. You had a wonderful little story about someone who had decided to stay unhappy, something like that. Uh,
Yes, I had mentioned to you earlier that when I got involved in this, I invited family members to come and whatnot. And I asked my dad if he wanted to come, and he said, no, 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 I don't want to do that. I didn't bother him. I didn't push him. I just left it. And he saw his children do it. He saw his grandchildren do it. And then one day I got a phone call. Okay, Alice, I want to come to brain school. So he came and he absolutely loved it. He got so much out of it. He was 80 at the time, and I was mentioning to you before that he needed a nap. He started napping in the afternoons. He did the training, no longer needed a nap. He was always super, super creative, and his creativity exploded after he ended up writing a memoir because he got in touch with so much and wanted to express and share with his children more about himself, and he found that to be a vehicle. Um, as a result of doing the training, before that he couldn't even speak about anything from the past, and now here he is. He was ready to share it, and he shared it as if he was talking about going to the store and buying milk and cheese or something. It became so easy.
Yeah, but if I have an attitude of perhaps I decide that for 30 years the world has been against me and I'm now unhappy.
Yeah.
And it's scary to imagine I might be happy.
Oh, I've got a story for you about that. Spot on. So typically in any Vipassana, any program, usually on the third day, people's ego comes in and they want to, I'm changing, I don't want to, let's lock it down, let's shut it down. This one woman came and the third day she came into the building and she said, Alice, that's it. I don't want to be happy. We both know I've been unhappy all my life, and I'm okay with that. I don't know what happiness is, and I don't want it. And I said, okay, leave your belief system at the door. Do the training. At the end of the week, you can decide if you want to pick up your unhappiness or pick up happiness. It's up to you, but stay with it. Da, da, da. So on the last day of the training, I said to her, hey, what did you decide? Do you want unhappiness or do you want to be happy? She get out of here. She's beaming from ear to ear. She's radiant, happy, and she leaves. She was in 60, and she had been on high blood pressure medication her whole life. Since she was 17, her doctor put her on. When she returned, she went back to the doctor. They took her off. She didn't need it anymore.
Of course not.
She had changed so much inside. It was really wonderful.
That sounds really great. Thinking of daily problems, we have more and more people with ADHD, attention deficit syndrome. Would it be addressed not specifically because you're trying to heal somebody, but I imagine that if you go through that brain training, uh, does it change?
Yes. Yeah. So there's a lot of scientific literature to support. You can go to your mom and dad, sort of mom and pop, as we say, corner store neurofeedback, and you can address ADD, ADHD. And there's some benefit, or it's not all bad. There can be some good. So you have to tease out the things that you want to change and not change what you want to keep. But I'll tell you a story. We did the training. I had a 15-year-old client, and he was high spectrum ADD, ADHD, not functioning so well in life. He was in a special needs classroom. He had no friends, really difficult to sit still. And he was a handful doing the training, an absolute handful, because you have to sit still. As soon as you move, you create artifacts. So you want to be still to get really good quality feedback. But he did the training. He was there with his mom and dad and a little brother. And at the end of the week, I said to him, what do you notice as different? He paused, reflected for a moment. He said, I can think before I act now.
Wow.
That's everything for somebody on that spectrum, right? Who's really high on that spectrum. And his little brother chimed in and said, he's so much easier to play with. That's in a week. And then when he
Mm.
went home a few months later, I was talking to the principal, uh, and she said he's now in a regular stream class and he actually has a friend. So he's still on the spectrum. Now he has more access to a bigger part of himself. That was a wonderful um, story, and worth the challenges he presented to be
Um,
there for him and let that happen.
I mean, there are many questions that come up. Firstly, usually it's in youth that we are most concerned about with ADHD. So, what's the good timing for children to start the program, or how old do they have to be before you can take them?
Well, in my program, I wouldn't take anybody less than 15,
Okay.
but 5 and 6 year olds are getting great results with neurofeedback with ADD and ADHD.
Sounds great. So, dementia, Parkinson, any results
So
there?
Parkinson's, we don't like to have. We wouldn't let them come into the training, but there is some good news. So what some of the science on Parkinson now is that their gamma is not firing. They have issues with the way their gamma comes. Um, so there's new treatments that they're probably going to be, if there's not out there already, there's some new treatments that possibly could be used. I personally don't want to take the liability of working with somebody with Parkinson's because it's so sensitive to, you know, uh, uh, yeah,
Basically, it's a liability issue. The
yeah, yeah,
disability is too big for
yeah.
you
But
to.
if you catch, so it reverses brain aging.
Hmm.
And if you catch somebody early enough, you can reverse it. I worked with a guy who had Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
He was quite a bit in the soup already. It was fascinating. It was quite an honor to be a facilitator for him. He, at the beginning of the day, was full on Alzheimer, like repeated everything. Couldn't really have a conversation. But he went through the training. He was treated like everybody else. At the end of the day, he could tell us what it was like to have Alzheimer's.
Wow.
He, yeah, yeah, it was. So he talked about how all his friends disappeared, and he was angry that they weren't there anymore. In the morning, he couldn't tell us that. In the evening, he could tell us. He told us how he tried so hard to keep himself present. He knew he was losing it, and so he would count by eights all the time. That was his thing. Count by eights to try and keep himself present. Um, so it was too late. He was already too far in. But at the same time, to have that experience where he came out, he was able to pop out for that short interval. And um, for me to be able to listen to what it was like for him to go through this experience of Alzheimer's. But if you
Wow.
catch it early enough, you can make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically anybody who uh, is approaching older age and realizing that some of the memory loss is setting in. That's probably a good time to, at latest, start with brainwave training.
Yeah. So what happens as we grow older? One of the things is our alpha starts to diminish, and it's part of the brain aging mechanism. But you can reverse that. You can change that, which I've seen with different people.
Did you say the alpha brainwave, or what is changing at age?
The alpha diminishes.
Alpha. Okay.
Well, yeah, you'll see the amplitudes come down.
Go
You have less
down.
energy. Yeah.
You have less
So the
energy.
brain's all about the electrical energy, and that's the frequencies that we capture on your scalp, and then we break it down into different frequencies. We identify.
do all the beta, theta, delta, do they all go down, or is it specific to alpha?
Uh, they all will diminish, but it's specific to the alpha is a really good
Is
indicator.
what my daily
That's
life
why
is.
women, especially when between 60 and 80, they tend to be more, they'll notice more anxiety as they get older,
Mm-hmm.
for example.
So that's something I've been implementing. Have you ever heard of methylene blue?
Yeah.
And the other thing that's lacking in most of our brains is lithium.
Mhm.
So I imagine that in a combination that could be wonderful. And probably even, I mean, energy is the money of the body. Without
That's a
energy,
great way to put it. That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
nothing works if you don't have enough energy. And how do I get the energy into my brain, which is the biggest consumptor of energy anyway? I mean, the
Yeah.
brain
You
takes up
increase brain flow, yeah, uh,
blood
blood flow
flow.
to the brain. Yeah. And that's what neurofeedback does. It increases blood flow to the brain.
It really increases the blood flow to the brain by doing neurofeedback. How does it work?
Well, you are using more. Um, you're working it harder.
Mm-hmm. Because you're using aspects of your brain which you have put to sleep because uh, you have certain habits that you don't need those daily with your
Well,
habits.
it's very intense workout for the brain. So each day you're running a marathon with your brain.
You're running a what?
Marathon
A marathon. Okay.
with your brain.
Mm-hmm.
That's how much exercise you're really working it out. Yeah. So it's
During
going
the
to,
during the brain training, you're running a marathon.
yes, yes, each day.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So everything is seems to me like a huge big clean out of my house or kitchen or whatever,
Yes, yes,
and
yes,
get all the oldie
yeah,
dirty stuck
yeah,
stuff that is accumulated in some corners, get it back out.
yeah. And it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Obviously. Wow. Ooh, any other stories of what miracles happened after or during or after the training?
Um, a lot of, let me tell you a little story. As sometimes it's hard to, there's so much that happens, but I'll tell you a story to illustrate what I mean by that. There's a guy who was doing the training, and in the training he had a kundalini experience. So the kundalini experience is when the energy comes up your spine and moves through, and you can see it on an EEG. You can see where
Oh,
that happened and whatnot.
okay.
And so he described his experience, said, yeah, yeah, this is a kundalini, you can tell, here's your brain waves, and this is the pattern. And had a little chat about it. Then he left for the day, and he came back the next day and he said, Alice, I was talking to my friend last night about that experience. And he said it was a big deal. And I said, yeah, yeah, I know it's a big deal. Well, you didn't make it seem that way. And I said, oh, really? And they went, oh my God, I get it. Around here it's a Tuesday. So we, because we hear so many wonderful things. Um,
So
trying to think of something, nothing's coming right off my mind,
why
but
why didn't you think it? I mean, Kundalini experience can be a huge experience where people are out of order for the next 2 years. If you listen, Penny Kelly, who explained it in detail of what happened to her and how she was just unable to cope with daily life because she couldn't sleep. She had all these weird bodily experiences. Her nerves were burning, and she was sitting on the roof at night because she couldn't sleep and walking into the stars and experiencing the whole universe in her focus, whatever she wanted to focus on. She was there, and it took her out of daily life, daily routines, of her work, of her family. Everybody thought she was crazy. And so, but there obviously not everybody has a full experience within one day or something. Sometimes it's only half an experience or a quarter of an experience. Anyway, it does show in your brain, does it?
That's right. Remember, every experience you have, there's an underlying pattern of brainwaves. One woman, it was quite interesting. She had psychic abilities, but she didn't know she had psychic abilities. And she had an experience of uh, somebody, a mediumship, coming to her experience. And it was a grandfather, and she talked to him and whatnot. And after she left, she went and continued to develop that, got some mentorship, and but that was something that she had the capacity for. I mean, we all do, but in her case, it was right there, more immediate, and it and through the work she was done, she had more access to herself, and that's the thing. You have more access to who you truly are, so that more creativity. Some of your gifts emerge, or your ability. I shouldn't say gifts, but your abilities emerge. Um, because you're more aligned with who you truly are. You have access to yourself, your integrated self.
It makes perfectly sense to me the moment you said that basically the brain gets cleared out or cleaned out of all the mud and everything that has accumulated by what other people told me of who I am. And there's tons of people who told me who I am before I ever got to the point that I realized, no, nobody knows who I am. I can only find out myself who I really am.
That's right.
And so
That's right.
if you work that brain like a marathon and you clear out all the dirt and all the mud people have thrown on you, because during your whole lifetime, especially as a child, I mean, you get scolded, you get told what to do, what not to do, where you're apt, where you're stupid, what you cannot do, what you're not allowed to do. All that stuff gets accumulated in my brain. And the moment I blow that free, obviously I can start realizing who I really am as an
Yeah.
original soul that came to this earth as a product of source, almighty God, whoever, however you want to call it.
Well, I remember one woman, she came and she was doing a forgiveness on her grandmother because her grandmother treated her, wrote a story about her, and it was a very scary story for her. It felt to her very abusive, and treated her. And in the story, she was, nobody, and her mother was the superhero. And as she was forgiving this mean grandmother, she realized she had a big aha. She realized that her grandmother was actually giving her a metaphor for her life. She had a very abusive family, her father, her mother, and her brother. So basically, the grandmother was telling her, "Go to your older brother will help you." And it wasn't about her it wasn't a mean thing. It was, here, this is my guidance to you, and the only way I can give it to you. And it cleared so much for her in terms of that sense of there was something wrong with her.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so many of us are after their childhood are given the impression that there's something wrong with me or with my
Yeah.
faculties or whatever. It's lamentably it's one of the most common things I think that happen to every human being born, or many humans.
And then we go through life, we reinforce that negative mechanism, and then until we choose something different. We drop that story and allow ourselves to be present, and then we have a different experience with life.
So your workshops take 5 days,
Yeah.
and how many people do you take at one moment, at one time?
I keep it limited to 3 people a week so that we can,
You're really
uh,
one-on-one special.
really have a good experience. So we keep it 3 people a week, and we offer it. Come to Germany. We're
Oh, you
gonna be
come to
back in
Germany.
this.
You are in Germany at the moment, which I
That's
find
right,
very
that's right.
fascinating.
Uh,
So,
I love Germany. I love being in Germany. So we're here in Germany, and I usually come for 2 weeks at a time, and we fill the weeks. We're kind of coming back in the spring. We have a full week next week, and then we'll be back the end of March, first week of April.
mhm.
And yeah, and people can go to my website, Externalize Mind without the E, so
I'll post
externalizemind.com,
it. I'll post it at the end.
and check it out. Yeah,
So, actually, it takes 5 days, and then you have 2 days off, and then you do the next 5 days at the location wherever people invite you to come. Is that correct? You are looking for hosts. What does a host who wants to invite you to do the workshop, 2 workshops in a row? 6 people have to be have to start.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
in Germany, we don't need a host because we organize it ourselves. We have a house, a great big old farmhouse that we stay in and do the training.
mhm.
But somebody in a different country say they wanted, and they had 6 people who wanted to do the training. They could talk to us. We could see if it worked. We have a semi-permanent location in Florida, and of course, we have the Victoria location as well, British Columbia. Yeah,
Great, and I suppose it's a considerable investment if you come to Germany. You have to pay for your flights. You're not alone. You're coming with a technician, I understand,
yeah.
and the accommodation and
And we
everything.
have a neuroclinician. We have a team to support. Um, so typically it's 15,000, but for Astrid Witt group, we are going to give a 20% um, uh, discount.
Wow, thank
So
you.
yeah, yeah, and yeah.
Great. Anything else I've missed we should be talking about? I'm looking at my list. There's, well, I think I've more or less gone through it. To me, the biggest revelation is that you really get the clutter out of your brain. Oh yes, one more aspect. If you do have a quiet mind, me, that sounds very much like a step into spirituality. People who have meditated, and I think in your background you said that meditation was one of your fortes. Um, so does it open me up to a what? How would you describe it in my spiritual
Presence.
practice? Presence.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're present. You're not in the future. You're not in the past. You're more present.
Did I hear you say that basically you can shortcut your meditation exercises to a very basically 5 days if you have
To make
already,
the changes in your brain.
yeah.
Yeah. You might still want to meditate. Why wouldn't you if you enjoy it? Of course, if you don't enjoy it, then um, but yeah, it's speeding things up. So you're using
Meditation
technology to speed the experience.
meditation does change my brain waves, and it puts me into a state that is very expansive. So after 5 days, basically I have learned through the neurofeedback to do it on my own within minutes or half hours or depending on my aptitude.
Well, I would say that in case of meditation, I wouldn't want to suggest that you know hurry up and meditate. So there's great value in meditating for an
Oh,
hour,
yes.
2 hours, whatever. So I'm not talking about shortening that. I'm talking about the effect on your brain. So when people meditate, they get a quieter mind, they're calmer, they get clear-minded, they have increase in creativity, they feel very relaxed, they're not as triggered generally. So those effects, so that might take decades to get to a place where you're really seeing some amazing
Yeah,
results. And what this is doing is you're getting there with a shorter time, again, because technology is speeding things up.
yeah.
So
Yes.
you know you can meditate and fall asleep or go into dull mind. And this is course correct, course correct, course correct.
Okay.
And there it is.
Yeah, so anybody who starts meditating and has these initial challenges will do a huge leap through brainwave trainment and get uh, within 5 days to a place where normally he or she would take a year or 2 years or whatever. People are very
Much
different,
longer.
but
Yeah.
much longer. Great,
Yeah.
great input. Okay, thank you so much. What are your next uh, trains and not entrainments? Your next brainwave workshops in Canada, in United States,
Well, in 2 weeks we're in Florida, and then we're back in Victoria, in Florida. We're back in Germany in
next year?
next year in the spring, end of March, early April, and then we've been invited to Kuwait. So yeah.
Because I have quite an international following at times. Lots of people come from the United States who are listening to my
Oh, wonderful.
yeah,
Yeah, they might be interested in the Florida location.
and Britain. I haven't heard anything about England. That's weird. You don't do anything there. I have seen
I've not done anything in England yet.
Switzerland, Spain. It's all places where people listen to me. So wonderful. And I assume that all the Americans listening from the United States must speak English, in contrast to most of the Germans, Austrians, Swiss, and yeah, that's those people who are
And maybe we tell people who English is not their first language or not comfortable speaking English. The trainings are in English at this point. Eventually, we'll have somebody who's trained, a German speaking person trained to do it. Um, but we can have a translator come on site, and you have volunteered to be one of those translators. So, yeah, you can bring a translator with you, or we can arrange a translator so that you can um, speak and communicate and hear and understand what we're saying as well.
wonderful. Thank you so very much, Alice. Was a
Danke schön. It's a really pleasure to meet you.
sehr gern geschehen. Was a pleasure to. Okay, bye.
Tschüss.
Oh, even that. Tschüss. Alles Gute.